welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Spencer. Glad to be here.
How you doing, Patrick?
Doing good.
Good, man. Long time no see. I was thinking about when was the last time we got together? Was it Whiskey Cake?
Whiskey Cake in Plano. Yeah.
That was a couple of years ago. I think you actually were the first person to introduce me to Whiskey Cake, dude.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have that. Literally, that is going to
that.
be a feather in your cap for your when you look back at the history of your career. You introduced me to
Milestone.
Whiskey. It's good, man. I went there a couple weeks ago, and I think I remember had the those deviled eggs, and they like rotated every couple weeks or something like that. So literally, I make that a staple every time I go. Got to figure out what the current deviled eggs recipe is. You know?
Excellent. Yeah, I got to try them all, right?
Yeah, you got to try them all, man. So you said you came up from you're kind of the downtown Dallas area, right?
Yeah, we live in Old East Dallas.
Old East Dallas.
Yeah, that's technically what they call it.
Well, is it old and it's in the east, or is there more to it than that?
I guess they moved East Dallas, so now it's the old part of it.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I used to live down in those parts as well and loved it, but I think my wife and I obviously, as we got older and looking for kids, it was like, I don't know if we can afford a place down here, so let's venture further north, and ended up all the way in Prosper now, where we got a little bit of space. So.
Oh, that's great. I'm jealous. We're already looking.
Are you looking?
Way.
Well, the only thing I'd say is good luck, because there's literally no homes right
Nothing.
now. Yeah,
Unless you want a lot. So,
you can buy a lot. Although our neighborhood was empty for like 3 years, with half of the lots weren't sold. And then all of a sudden, overnight, I guess lumber prices hit a certain level, and the builder was like, you know what? Let's build every single lot at once. So,
but
anyways, man. So I know we'll talk. Obviously, the fun thing is going to be reference-based pricing today.
Sure.
That's why I invited you on. I know you're the expert on that. But before we go into reference-based pricing, RBP, why don't we take a second to get to know you both personally and professionally?
Great. Yep.
So I know you went to Austin College, right? Up in Sherman.
College in Sherman. Go Kangaroos. Yeah.
Is it? So I used to drive by Austin College on the way to. I went to Drury University in Springfield, Missouri.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So you had to go up that 75 corridor. It turns into 69, and I'm like, Austin College, but it's in Sherman. Why is it Austin College? It always confused me.
Yeah, that everyone either thinks you went to Boston College or you went to ACC down in Austin.
Oh yeah, ACC.
Austin Community College.
So what'd you study there, man?
Business administration, and then kinesiology as a minor. On that side.
Okay.
So initial was going to go into medical sales, but graduated in 2008, and that wasn't quite an option on the table.
That was pulled off the table. So did you go there for sports, or was there a connection there?
I did. Yeah, I played football. I was a linebacker. Played there all 4 years.
Right on, man. In that, what's that? Division II?
Division III.
Division III.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So it's more so you can't give you academic scholarships, but glad I did it. Probably got me into a school that I would have been, borderline getting into and otherwise. So.
Yeah, that's right, man. I kind of did the same thing. So, take it where you can get it, man. So you studied kinesiology. Was that just like a passion of yours as well? You said you wanted to go into medical sales, but...
Yeah, just some correlation from there. They do a lot of pre-med. They actually have the highest acceptance rate in a medical school in the nation out of only 1,500 kids.
Okay.
So it is a more strenuous type program than just, like PE, if you will.
PE.
So, it's, a little bit more than that, P&A, anatomy, things like that. So just trying to understand if I was going to go into that field, what to expect being in the operating room.
So obviously then you said the timing, right? The 2008 crash. So since the timing was bad for that, what'd you end up doing instead?
I actually got hired on as a college hire at Sun Life. Started dialing for dollars, seeing who was hiring. I actually had an offer from Cigna down in Houston market.
Okay.
But really wanted to get into the reinsurance side. That's always been something that I thought was really interesting for employer groups. So that's why I took the Sun Life offer in Dallas.
And that was straight out of school. So you say, So they just said, oh, you seem like a pretty smart kid. We'll teach you what to do, or what?
Sure. Well, they had a college hire class. They brought on 25 of us. 2 years later, 5 remained on that side.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So, and then just kind of made the most of it. Did, reinsurance at first. They segmented it out. Also did ancillary. And then was there for 8 years after that. Looking for something a little bit different, a little bit more unique in the market, and came across RBP through mutual contact, started really researching it more, and it really appealed to me, bringing more to the brokerage community than I was doing currently.
Okay.
So I was ready for a new challenge, and
You said you were at Sun Life back when they used to have the reps sell both the ancillary and the stop loss lines.
Yeah,
and then they took that away at some point.
Yeah, about
right?
halfway through. So yeah, it was more so, the race to zero on the ancillary spreadsheet. So
yeah, I mean, I totally get it, right? And you and I were talking beforehand. I never had either the pleasure or the curse of having to sell ancillary benefits, and nothing wrong with that. Obviously, there's the good value for the people that need those things. But for me, it wasn't something that ever interested interested me, right? So I didn't gravitate towards it. And by the time I ended up at Sun Life, we were talking about almost everybody I sit down with has been at Sun Life at some point in their career, but I sold stop loss directly.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what it would have been like for me to have to sell both, right?
Right. Yeah, it is a challenge, especially towards the end of the year. You're definitely more focused on the reinsurance and the ancillary side.
Yeah.
But it did create more leverage for the brokers, brokering it, putting it all together.
Sure.
At renewal, they kind of had me over the barrel on that one. So, yeah, they could really do what they wanted. But I would say that Sun Life was a great carrier in terms of the gray market, especially on the, life disability side. If there was an area that maybe they shouldn't have paid that claim, they really did their job on, following through and doing the right thing.
Yeah,
so
and we kind
feel
of
good.
talk and jest about Sun, for the amount of people that have worked there, but it's because they have a tremendous brand. Obviously, they're dominant in the marketplace in stop loss. In the training program, I don't know about you, but I was completely new in sales when I started. So just, taught me everything I needed to know, had a mentor that was assigned to me to take me under his wing and get started. And realistically, I don't know if I would have had the same career path hadn't it been with them. So not to make a commercial for Sun Life, right? But obviously there is a reason why they are who they are. But the other thing I want to ask you about, if you don't mind, I think you have a pretty interesting, I know you're married, but would you mind sharing your interesting marriage story?
Sure. So, at Sun Life, to keep you motivated, we called it the carrot trip. At the end, if you met your goal, you were able to go on this trip, kind of varied by year. The one coming up that year, Caroline and I had been dating for about a year. I already knew I was going to marry her, and they said it was going to be in Maui. So I was like, man, this is the perfect opportunity. We went there, ended up staying a few extra days, and we eloped. So I, on a beach, popped down on a knee, said, will you marry me? She said, well, did you ask my dad? I did. Yeah. You want to get married tomorrow? All right, let's do it. So technically got married on the Sun Life dime. So thank you, Sun Life.
That's the most unique marriage story I've ever heard. Were you able to sneak parents in to be there or anything?
No, we didn't, just because we didn't want to, play favorites on that or who was included. So when we came back, we had, a nice dinner for the family. And then all of our rowdy friends, we all went to community brewery that had just been opened and had a nice little get-together there. So
that's awesome, man. Well, I think Sun Life probably would still tell the story to this day. I mean, that's a pretty interesting story, man. And I'm sure your wife, obviously, to get married in Maui is probably a once-in-a-lifetime type It is,
experience. But as I've been told several times, I outkicked my coverage. So being in sales, I couldn't give her time to think about it. I had a contract there.
Sense of urgency, right?
Hey, she signed it on my back on the beach, the marriage certificate. So got it done.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do, man.
You do.
Congrats. And
Thank you.
Obviously, you guys have been together, 8 years now. So,
8 years, yeah.
So things are going well.
It paid off.
It paid off, man. Well, good for you, man. And you said your father is actually in the industry, right?
He is, yeah. My dad was a broker at, he started IPS Advisors.
Okay.
That, they were acquired by Hub International. And he recently just finally retired. So he's off playing golf, living the good life.
Well, good for him, man. I mean, that's what we're all working for, right? Is eventually there's going to have to be an exit of some sort. So happy he got to do it, kind of on his own volition and enjoy himself too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I saw that side on the broker side. Grew up in it. Yeah. Didn't really want to go on that, but did want to be involved in the industry. Did see a lot of value.
Well, did he kind of recruit you in or say, hey, this is what it looks like? Or did he let you kind of be attracted to what you were interested in?
He led the horse to water, but I, did the drinking. Yeah. So, yeah, it was more so, I'll give you some kind of leads here, but really you're going to have to figure the rest out.
Right on.
But, he's always been a good resource for me. Sure. Good backboard if I ever had any good questions to ask him. So definitely helped me save, a lot of headaches and heartaches on that side.
Well, that's cool, man. And let's, we'll dive in if you don't mind kind of the meat of the subject. I know we're going to talk reference-based pricing today, and we're going to get in super deep to that. Before we go into the weeds where it might lose some folks, let's start at traditional network today. So could you describe what a traditional network arrangement is for medical insurance?
Sure. Well, what I was taught was really it's medical, professionals, providers, doctors that have contracted that with that network to provide services for members on their health insurance plan itself. So really it's either a fee for service, more so on the doctor side, or really on the facility, it's more so like a discount off of the bill charges is what we've seen.
Okay.
So really it's kind of what we call a top-down approach. So you're taking bill charges, offering a 50% discount. So $100,000 bill comes in at $50,000. That's what the plan is going to allow for that payment on that side. Now, really the benefit of it is a lot of the appeal for employer groups is the simplicity of it.
Sure.
Hey, I have an open access. Hey, all these, in and out of network doctors, You can go to see all these doctors. There's no issues, any pushback on that side. And then they do bundle all the pricing and make it very simple for the client to pay for the bill.
Sure.
Now, on the other side,
sure.
Really that depending on the region, those discounts can not be so great on, certain regions. And then also with that simplicity of the billing comes at a cost. So
sure.
it is going to be a higher amount than you would if you were trying to break these, different components apart and really tie down on what you want to do.
Yeah. Well, and so with the simplicity though comes a little bit of opaqueness, right? So
it does.
That's
less
one of the
transparent.
main. Less transparent. Obviously one of the top criticisms of that arrangement is, oh, you tell me what your discounts are, but I don't know what it's off of what, right? Nobody knows what the bill charge is going to be on the front end, and so you have to wait and receive an EOB 6-8 weeks later in the mail, then go, oh, this is what I owe, right? And
Exactly. And that's tough. It's one of the few markets where you're buying something as a consumer, you don't actually know what the cost is.
Sure.
On that side.
So that's a traditional network, like a PPO, HMO, POS. So
yeah.
And so that's that. So let's contrast that with reference-based pricing, or RBP. I know Weston has heard this term before, but reference-based pricing, why don't you tell me exactly what you think that is?
So reference-based pricing as a whole is an open access plan. So you're getting rid of that PPO network we just talked about. So really it's allowing you to go access care wherever you want, and comparative to the traditional model, which is top down, we're bottom up.
Okay.
So we're referencing Medicare, the cost of Medicare, and paying at a percentage of set amount above that, or cost. So we're looking at the two, whichever is the higher of the two is what we're paying out for that amount.
Okay.
On that side.
So reference-based price, the reference point or the benchmark being Medicare. So tell me why the choice is to use that as the benchmark. Is it because the cost is more transparent with that payment source, or is there another reason why it's been used as the benchmark?
Well, they're already accepting that, from the majority of their Medicare and Medicaid patients. So it's already it's kind of a break even for them. So we're paying them roughly at about 125% of Medicare.
Okay.
In the traditional market, if you're told in industry, hey, you're going to make 25% margins on this, they'd be elated, on that side. But healthcare is a little bit different entity of itself.
Well, because they're making 400, 500, 600% margins elsewhere, right?
They are, yeah. And, and roughly they're shifting the cost of, roughly 80% of what they're making is coming from 11% of their population coming in.
Sure.
So it really kind of shows you that deviation between the Medicare side and the commercial side.
Well, do you think that's a function of the Medicare payment rate being too low, or why is that the profit center? I'm sure we'll unpack this further, but most of the profit center, of course, is coming from the private sector.
It is.
Okay.
I would say more so what's probably underpriced is the Medicaid.
Okay.
Medicare is, maybe on some certain procedures it might be a little bit underpriced, but generally that is still the break even. But also that's why we're willing to pay out certain regions. If the Medicare price is lower, that's why we pay. If the cost is higher, we'll pay out the higher of the two.
You pay out the higher of the two.
Higher of the two. Okay. Yeah.
And so, is this something that can be done, with a traditional ASO network with a Blue Cross or United or Cigna, or would you need an independent TPO in order to install something like this?
Good question. We're not there yet.
Okay.
It is with independent TPAs. So, I would say, especially for groups, if you're with a traditional ASO and then you're looking to go RBP, it could be intimidating to be making a jump, not only from the ASO, but I'm getting rid of my PPO network as well.
Exactly.
So, but we really do try to partner with preferred TPAs that really understand customer service. We're getting away from the 1-800-GOOD-LUCK number. You actually have white glove service, someone who's going to help you out in the gray areas, whether it's calling your provider, helping you walk through any of the questions you have, or if it is like, for instance, like a balance bill or more complicated RBP question, they warm transfer it over to us.
Okay.
So plus the ones that we partner with have already been in the RBP space for 5 to 10 years. So they know how to deal with that in comparison to the traditional model.
Well, yeah, and I've had a couple TPAs on here. I had Jennifer Morgan over at Collective Health, which is a more kind of tech-forward, independent TPA, and then Dr. John Lopez at Meritain, and of course they're affiliated with Aetna. So
they are
two different spaces, right? Two different things that they do. But I imagine the closer you get to the BUCA side, the more objection to this payment methodology. Is that safe to say?
That is,
okay.
Yeah.
And do you think they're ever going to allow for the coming around or sort of connecting or partnering as an administrator with the reference-based price group, or do you ever see that happening?
I could see that happening. I mean, something I'll speak about later, but when I first started really doing like a dual option type approach, because you can do PPO and RBP next to each other, was only for jumbo, massive size groups. You can now do that under 100 lives.
Okay.
So I think that really is kind of speaking to the trend that we're seeing, that there is some shift within that. I don't know what that date would be, but I do think that.
No, I need a date,
I
Patrick.
know,
Tell me
right?
exactly
Yeah,
when it's
sorry.
going to happen. No, that's all right. But I get it, right? There's always going to be a hesitancy. There's always going to be a resistance. They have their own business model. The reference-based pricing methodology somewhat undercuts, the way that they price things, and it somewhat undercuts their business model. So I understand that it's going to take some time to come around, and as any sort of private company, they should be competitive against things that
Sure.
they don't do. So that's kind of the arrangement. You mentioned some TPAs, more independent TPAs are typically doing it. Give me an example of a couple TPAs maybe locally that are good at reference-based pricing.
One of our preferred is Assured Benefit Administrators, ABA.
Yeah.
Locally, so they've been doing it. They've had previous arrangements. We now work with them as well. Lucent Health is also another one out there that's riding a lot of RBP in that space. It's probably predominantly more new business coming from RBP.
Okay.
Than the traditional network. So I would say probably in the Texas market, those are the two that I've seen the most riding RBP.
Okay. And is it, you said some of it is about experience, but is there any situations where an independent TPA is just not open to that, or just is not interested in maybe adjudicating claims in that manner? Does that happen as well?
Well, a lot of it is we're doing a lot of that heavy lifting.
Oh,
so
it's
kind of more so an education process for them, or really if they just, maybe are in a market that is a little bit tougher for it, or if they've been burned by it in the past, or had a broker just sell it, throw it over the fence, hey, y'all figure it out, and just had a bad experience with that. Yeah. That's generally what I've seen as a bad taste in their mouth, because there has been a big evolution in RBP. I definitely think that we're in RBP 2.0.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people are used to the Gen 1 version and had a bad experience with it.
Well, so let's kind of unpack that further. So RBP 2.0, what's kind of included in the new iteration of that?
So really, when it first started, it was more very stringent, stiff in terms of the reimbursement structure, not really more combative, not willing to negotiate on these claims, and it was all done reactively. So it's all done after the fact. Now, the 2.0 version is much more proactive. So on a lot of these elective procedures that require pre-certification, we reach out ahead of the time, letting them know about the expected reimbursement, educating them on it. Hey, it might be less. We pay you within 2 weeks. It's more so collaborative on that end. So that really lessens the chance of a balanced bill being on the back end, which is one of the bigger concerns on RBP in itself.
Well, that's just it. And, I definitely want to touch on that. I'll come back to my other question, but I'm glad you mentioned balanced billing, because I always – of course, my understanding of reference-based pricing was somewhat at an arm's length, because I was at a stop-loss carrier, Sun Life, like we mentioned. And, of course, they were evaluating that payment rate versus your standard PPO and trying to give credibility to the arrangements, and maybe even vetting certain vendors that they felt were doing a good job at that. But I still was at a distance, right? I didn't get in this level and talk about that. Balance billing from a layman's person perspective, I always heard that was the primary objection to reference-based pricing. So what is balance billing, and what does that really mean? What's the real concern there?
Sure. So balance billing, you go in for medical service, whether that be in a physician setting or in the facility. After the services, you already paid your patient responsibility, and you still get a bill in the mail after the fact for something else that you owe on that side, whether that be more complications with your procedure, an out-of-network provider breathed on you, and then that's when you might get a balance bill in the traditional sense.
Okay. So balance billing means the remainder that was unpaid is now going to the member, and they're being billed for that additional amount.
Yes,
correct? Okay.
Exactly.
And so I imagine, obviously, the fear, if I'm somebody that, I haven't ever personally been in that situation, but let's say I'm a member, all of a sudden I get a bill in the mail that says I owe $50,000. Obviously I'm going to go, what? And, there's going to be a sense of panic, and that's often used as sort of maybe a scare tactic away for reference-based pricing. So let's put the real context, because I know it's not an unfounded concern, but let's put it in the proper context, because I don't think it's quite as bad as people think.
It really isn't. I mean, I think the reason that it is viewed as that way, because what they've dealt with in the past in the traditional sense, if you get a balance bill, you have to pay for it. That's on you. Mm-hmm. There's no real resources available to you to handle that in that sense. And even in the traditional sense, in inpatient care or in emergency type situations, members are getting a balance bill roughly 30 to 40% of the time already. And on our side, really, you do have a dedicated patient advocate who's going to take over that balance bill for you and handle the negotiations for you. Kind of similar to what you're seeing with the No Surprise Act. With these balance billings that's already occurring, they're creating a mediator between the two, so that they're handling it for them. So we've already been doing that on that side. Now the thing is that The likelihood of a balanced bill rate is about 2% on the back end. And then with that proactive approach on the front, I would count all pushback, them looking for more payment on the front end at about 4 to 5%.
Okay.
So that but there can be some sticker shock because, as you mentioned, you might get a lot larger balance bill in the mail for RBP versus than you would a $300-400 bill that you would just pay with Blue Cross or United on that side.
Yeah, so I'm sure there's different answers, depending on who's asking the question. But if I'm a member and get a balance bill, right, versus I'm a self-funded employer, does a self-funded employer allowed to sort of intervene or help a member if they receive a balance bill, or is it truly on the member if that remainder is still left over?
On our side?
Yeah. Or either side. Just trying to understand because, obviously we need to be self-funded to be reference-based price arrangement. So, I'm a member. I've got a $1,000 leftover bill. ClaimDOC was unable to maybe negotiate it down on the front end, or they're having difficulty on the back end because the provider's being a stickler. How do you triage that even further to get it come to conclusion?
Sure. So on our side, we do have a negotiation corridor. We're willing to negotiate on these claims on that side, but we are taking a co-fiduciary stance. So we are taking over the fiduciary responsibility for the member, taking them out of the equation, send cease and desist, don't contact the member. You come to us if you want to negotiate this bill. So we really go through those steps. And if, worst case scenario, if we did, we would go to court over it on that sense, but also by our proactive outreach on the front end. We've already let them know the expected reimbursement. They cast a check, which puts them at a little bit of disadvantage, in that situation. Knock on wood, we've never lost in court on that. We've been in business since 2013. So really that does kind of create, more leverage for us on the back end.
Well, surely, yeah. I mean, I definitely like the softer approach to this, and maybe that's part of that 2.0 version that you were talking about. It's like there's a carrot or a stick approach. It's a lot easier to go to them up front and say, hey, we'll give you X. Okay, that doesn't work. Well, I'm authorized to go a little bit more to Y.
Yeah.
But versus the other side of that is now you're trying to balance bill a member. It's a more, I would say, contentious probably discussion point at that point. And I'm sure you've got a lot of people that are upset, including the member and probably the employer as well. So I think everybody at the table would be less, would have less desire for that to be the outcome, correct?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then on the traditional side, really the members just left to pay that themselves.
Okay.
So, or they can try to call and negotiate it themselves on their behalf. But, I mean, I'm in the industry and I've done that, and it's been a challenge as well. So,
well, how often you mentioned about 4 to 5% on the front end is, a pushback, or it doesn't get
almost 3%.
Almost 3%.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
closer
2%
to on the back.
On the balance bill
how
side.
Often does it actually go to litigation then?
Very rarely.
Very rarely.
It's a 0.0001 type percentage on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd imagine there'd have to be some tremendous dollars at stake for the provider to want to go that route as well. So, the only reason I want to dig as far as we can there is just, that's obviously a main objection to this arrangement is just simply the scare tactic of the balance billing, or you're going to have to go to court and there's going to be a legal battle. But I think putting it in proper context doesn't just say that the risk disappears, but let's really understand what the true risk is instead.
Yeah. On that side. And also I would say, like, even a good example is, when I first came on, we had triplets that came in, NICU claim, $1.5 million. On that side, it did take, quite some time, over 6 months to negotiate that claim. But we were able to successfully get down 2 of the kids down to about 200% of Medicare, and one at about 320. Okay. So, I mean, it really is, even on a very complicated type thing like that, at a very highly rated provider, we were able to still negotiate those claims, because they really do also see the benefit of, you're not chasing after members for these funds, which the majority of the time they're just sending them collections on that side and collecting pennies on the dollar. Yeah, we might be paying you a lower reimbursement, but we're paying you within 2 weeks. And then also we're notifying, within, that you're not a safe harbor, but members can go here. So we're sending more members to you as well on that side.
Well, and it makes sense, right? I definitely understand the value proposition, but let's talk the actual context of the proper employer profile. Of course, this isn't for every employer, right? So, and we're also probably talking about the furthest iteration, I would say, of self-funding that there is, except maybe going completely non-network or something to that effect. So this isn't for the first, somebody that's been fully insured for 20 years and they're 50 lives, and all of a sudden, boom, let's go Maybe somebody does that, but not. That's
a few.
You probably had a few.
Not that many. Yeah.
But I would say that's probably not the ideal profile. So what is an ideal employer profile to do this?
Well, high level, what I look for in terms of factors are issues of retention, lower wage employees or low participation on the plan. For me, that says if they have issues with retention, people are leaving often, they're looking for more ways to bring them in the door, with better benefits on that side. Mm-hmm. But if they have lower wage employees, that kind of relates to the low participation because they can't afford the health plan. I mean, I'm looking at employee-only rates coming from fully insured at $800, $900, and it's just getting unachievable to be able to afford that on that side.
So that obviously the cost, the cost savings as an attractive reason, from a group size or industry. I mean, is there anything that you think either is absolutely not a fit or is the exact maybe type of group that would want to do this?
We first started out really the highest penetration we had was with low margin type industries, so blue gray collar. Manufacturing, construction, retail, restaurant management, trucking, just to name a few on that side. But really overall, it's really more so evolved into a lot broader sense of that. So we're looking more so at, anywhere from healthcare to a lot of different industries on that side. But now not only are they looking for bottom line savings, but they also want the member experience. They want the whole soup to nuts. They want the same look and feel that they had and still benefit in those savings on that side.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm curious what this is like from a member perspective for education, like what sort of outreach is required. Because if you present this idea, like you said, in an environment where, you've got factory workers that, they're out there doing their job, maybe different hours of the day, and you're going, now I have to explain this, this is a pretty complex concept. So how do you do it in a way that those folks that aren't really familiar with benefits and don't really care, quite frankly, other than am I going to be able to go to the doctor? What is it involved on the front end to make sure that this group is ready to onboard?
It is having a good implementation strategy and everything that you want to do and accomplish through that way. The main ways that we're able to communicate, we have educational videos that are cartoons, look a lot like you, that good looking, and
it
they're
works,
very
right?
it does, and they're very simple, easy to understand, even explain to you what an EOB is on that side. So we'll drip campaign those on an ongoing basis. We really try to customize as many materials as we have. Consumer app, we have that has, can help steer you to a good provider on that side, or if you have any questions, has all your contact information in there as well. So that's, the main ways that we go about it, as well as, more traditional things. You have your open enrollment packets. We have, standalone things in the break room that kind of reiterated on that side as well.
Well, and I know you said you guys offer like a dedicated person or sort of white glove service experience.
We do. Yeah. So
you have somebody that's, I can pick up the phone and call, Rebecca over at ClaimDOC, and I'll know that I'll be able to get my question answered, right?
Exactly, on that side. And then also we even take it a step further. We have what we call as the Pave the Way Program. So during the open enrollment process, we look at their top utilized providers on the physician and facility side, and we start proactively outreaching to them to let them know that our members are coming in. They're going to be on the ClaimDOC health plan at XYZ company. Here's the new reimbursement structure. Let us know if you have any questions. Now, we're really not having that much pushback from physicians because we're already reimbursing similar to what the traditional networks are already.
Yeah.
The majority lion's share of savings is coming from that facility side.
Well, I was going to, no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, yeah.
I was going to say, this all sounds great. I need to go get a knee operation. I have plenty of time to plan this ahead of time. That's fine. What about an emergency situation? Like, I don't want to think about where I have to go if my kid's arm is broken. So what happens in
Go wherever you like because, luckily for, the ACA, Affordable Care Act, says you can't really turn anyone away in an emergency situation. So that would be one of the ones that we're having to have to deal with on the back end.
Okay.
So.
And is that, is there any concern of a balance bill in an emergency situation, or is that prohibited under like some sort of guidelines or law or anything?
Well, more now, so it is, with Air Ambulance with the No Surprise Act. So there are certain, areas and components that they're starting to limit that.
Okay.
But we still have had very successful negotiations because they are usually more egregious in the balance billing and kind of got us, okay, we'll take this payment and kind of move on from there.
Okay, yeah, because I think just as you think about, well, what is the, with a lack of knowledge or experience with this arrangement, if I'm just a person on the health plan and I have an emergency, I don't want to have to open an app. I don't want to have to call somebody.
Exactly.
I just need to get to the doctor right away.
Closest place you can get, yeah.
Well, and so you mentioned facilities, right? There's different payment rates depending on the type of doctor or procedure, correct?
There is.
Yeah, so can you explain that part for me?
Well, there isn't really a set percentage that they're willing to accept. I mean, like, for example, in Dallas, Fort Worth, you mentioned a knee operation. Yeah. Total knee replacement on the low end can cost you $50,000. On the high end, $250,000 with no correlation as to the quality.
Okay.
So that really kind of gives you and if you kind of make that more throughout the U.S., it's very broad in terms of the regions and the reimbursement amount. Kind of how I compare it is, they say that for the traditional network, the reimbursement after discount is 258% of Medicare.
Okay.
But I say, if I look at the U.S. as its whole, we're running at 180% or below that on that side. And the physicians is more 120, and then the facilities driving it up closer to that 180 amount.
So facilities is, the hospitals like we talked about.
Yes, facility, outpatient care, emergency, urgent care, things of that nature.
Okay. So those are the more difficult perhaps to negotiate, and those have the bigger variance in dollar in charges.
They do, yeah, because we generally see more fee for service on the doctor side, unless it is a specialty type doctor.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes total sense. I mean, I think it's important to compartmentalize the types of services, right? So, what will you really be concerned about? What is the bigger sort of, you mentioned you have like different thresholds to negotiate for different things, but I think it brings it into proper context. I appreciate you saying that, 258% is the average
for
the
traditional
PPO,
network,
for traditional.
PPO. And also there are two types of approach. You can go for RBP. The more common way is you're still using a PPO network for the doctors. Okay. So we use, like a PHCS network, and then you let us handle all the heavy lifting on the facility side. But we do have at ClaimDOC about a third of our block is full replacement, which kind of speaks to our Pave the Way program, that proactive outreach on the front end, and have almost 90% acceptance by the doctors before they even go live.
Well, I mean, it makes sense, right? Because you're removing a couple layers of the veil of, we talked about the lack of transparency, the opaqueness in the payment rate. From an employer perspective, obviously we want to save money. What about some, reasons why a group might not be ready for RBP? What are some of the common things that you might have a group that you're like, oh, we're the right fit, and it just didn't sell? So how do those fall through?
Top two, if they don't like to save money or if they like high renewals. But generally, if they
spoken like a true salesman. Yeah.
But if they do, if they are very resistant to change, meaning as in you're bringing on another traditional carrier, there's savings on the table. No, we don't want to make the move this year. It might take a really bad year for them to really start looking at RBP on that side. We've had challenges in the past where if you did bring in a jumbo group that was limited in the HR resources, the communication, if they're really spread out, how are we going to go about that? Now that you have concierge, you have a lot more resources within the RBP companies themselves that are assisting with that. People sometimes will even put live members, team members on the ground from our side to help educate members, for those big groups. But, we really have seen that transition. Like I mentioned, the concierge, that one point of contact has seemed to help quite a bit for the jumbo groups on that size.
Okay.
So,
well, and is it maybe, are you seeing a lot of groups transition straight from fully insured to this arrangement, or are they stair-stepping into self-funding and eventually landing on RBP? What's more common?
Both. So we're actually working the partially self-funded. We can do anything 50 lives and up.
Okay.
On that side, really it really is. We're seeing a lot more movement in that. I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of groups that were really limited in their ability to go self-funded because maybe limited data or their group size on that side. But no, I'd say most of the groups are already self-insured, the ones that are seriously looking at this and going that RBP route. Maybe they already put some type of cost containment levers in place. Maybe they're already doing this in an RBP on the out-of-network. They don't even know it on that side, or maybe it's trying to control costs on the RX. So
okay, yeah, and that makes sense. And I guess do you consider the direct contracting approach as an even further step in this regard, or is it compatible with you guys what you're doing as well?
In concert, I think it's good to have a safe harbor in certain markets, but also contracting with every provider really isn't the goal here. You kind of want to pick your horse and kind of run with it in certain markets on that side.
That makes sense, yeah. And so you mentioned a little bit, those jumbo groups that might not necessarily have the HR staff or bandwidth to do this. Yeah. Would you say that there is a little more administration on the employer side in order to make sure this thing works?
I would say it's about the same change that you would be making any other carrier, but the main emphasis is the strategy on the re-education for the members.
Okay.
So, yeah, I would say that once we go live, there's going to be a little bit more noise after about the third month. Once claims start coming in, Joe in the back was sleeping during open enrollment, wasn't paying attention, got this bill in the mail, comes to HR upset about it.
Okay.
So really it's kind of more so understanding that, and we don't want to create more workload for them. So that's why we really helped out on the account management side as well as implementation to make sure that that's not becoming an issue in itself
Okay, and I guess obviously you partner with TPAs that you feel do a strong job in adjudicating these types of claims. So I guess if you're an employer, right, you're trusting that ClaimDOC plus whoever your administrator is can work in a collaborative way in order to really prevent a lot of the noise by just working in conjunction with each other to make sure that everybody knows who's supposed to do what and how. Right?
Exactly. At the end of the day, we don't give them more arrows in their quiver. Sure. They actually have more resources to call on that side. And also, we've seen some of these large groups that realize all these savings on the table, that they can go hire additional HR staff to even just help directly with the new health plan.
Yeah, I mean, because I presume we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in some of these groups, if not millions. I mean, for the
jumbo.
Yeah, so that's what you look at that spreadsheet, right? And you don't want to buy just solely based on a spreadsheet, but you look at that and you see the potential for savings. I mean, yeah, why does somebody not? I always go back to, and I get it. You're running a business. You have 1,000 other things to be concerned about, and maybe this seems too complicated. But I always think about, well, what can you do with those dollars? If we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, where could you reallocate those to help grow your business? Like you said, the staff up. It just thinks from a perspective of a business. I'm just going, man, if I know that this has a high likelihood of working, I trust my vendor partners in doing this.
Yeah.
It's almost seems like a no-brainer, and I know it's not, and I'm biased in that regard. But I think aren't the stop loss carriers starting to come around to this idea as well and starting to give a lot of credence to?
They really are. Yeah, it was a little bit slower, more so shadow pricing for a while.
Yeah.
Not really sure how this is going to play out. We'll discount it year 2. But really, I mean, our medical loss ratio, Spencer, are running the mid-50s.
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 Okay.
Our trend is at 1.8%.
Okay.
So, I mean, really, we have really outreach more to them to help them understand how to price this correctly, with the data reporting and everything that we have. But, the Sun Lifes of the world, Swiss Re's, they understand how to price this. Mm-hmm. It was predominantly more so in the MGU space, what you've seen as being more aggressive on that side for RBP. But, I mean, I'm seeing anywhere discounts on the spec, anywhere from 15 to 25%.
Yeah, I believe
5 to 15 off the ag. Generally the savings is 25 to 30% off the medical spend itself.
Well, and that's why I always think about it is I talk to a lot of vendors that do different things that do have an impact on stop loss. And even some of the folks that are newer in the space, I say, well, if you can get the stop loss carriers to come around and be convinced, the proof is right there, right? If I present to you a group and say, you can pay in a PPO or you can pay in an RBP and I get the same, everything else in the contract is the same in stop loss, and the stop loss carrier gives me 25% off my spec premium, I'm going to go, well, clearly these very large organizations that have, giant blocks of business that have law of large numbers, they understand it. If they believe that's the case, there's probably something to this, right?
There is. Yeah, I would say so. And also the majority of our groups are seeing no increase at renewal.
Okay.
So it really is strong in that regard. Our retention is very strong. We're keeping groups on average of over 4 years.
Okay.
That's pretty good. Our retention rate's very high from that. But that's also more so the Gen 2 stuff I also mentioned, not making sure that it's not just about savings, because that's kind of out the door. We already know we can do that.
Yeah.
So really, what else are you going to do for me?
Yeah, I know. That's why it's funny when you start, doing very innovative things for people. They always go, okay, cool. What else? What's next?
Yes, exactly.
Is this not enough? I saved you a bunch of money. But obviously, you said retention is really high, but I'm sure there are some groups that end up leaving.
Yes.
I have I have an idea of what might make somebody leave, but what's the most common reason somebody goes back to another arrangement?
Really, if this is a broker prospecting with this tool, this is used very commonly for new business to generate. And then maybe if they told them this is going to be the same look and feel that you had, but you're going to save 25%. That's not the case. We know that, right? So that's probably one of the more common reasons. Also, from that savings we generate, a lot of these groups double or triple in size in a very short period of time, and they end up getting bought out and purchased.
Okay.
So then they end up being, brought into whatever that plan is. So going back to that traditional side.
Well, that makes sense, right? It's obviously, it's heavily dependent on who the CFO and the HR person are at the company. And
that could be that
you get bought by a parent company and they're like, we're not doing this anymore. Nope, that's not for us. Okay. That makes sense. Because I always would see groups that at least what went self-funded had that knee-jerk reaction and go back fully insured because they kind of went into it for all the wrong reasons.
Sure.
It sounds like that's probably the case. I mean, God, heaven forbid you're an employer who a broker is convinced you that it's going to be the simplest thing in the world. And sure, come on over and do this. And there's not going to be anything to worry about and you'll save a bunch of money. I mean, that's really unfortunately misleading. And I know people do what they have to do to win the business, but I think that also sets a bad precedent for not only for you, but for the agency side as well, because if that's the way that you're winning business and almost, I don't want to say tricking, but misleading somebody into doing that, you're talking about a fairly sophisticated process. And so that's not something that you should just, oh yeah, do it. And then thanks for signing the BOR and I'll see you later. You know, that's not going to work.
It's also something we can't just unbundle under overnight either on that side. But, you know, also if they did sell in that situation and then the CEO's wife gets a big balance bill and their vendor partner isn't very good at negotiating this, so they outsource it to another partner who handles the actual negotiation, which happens more common than you think. That's when it can go bad too. And then, you know, that kind of, we all get grouped in that same boat.
Well, the proverbial CEO's wife always seems to be the one that makes a lot of noise sometimes.
I mean, it's, we use it common, but
yeah, I get it. I can't tell you, like real life stories. They're like, oh, the so-and-so's the CEO's wife had to go do this and she's not happy. And so he's not happy. And now we're making a change. Right. So let's talk the future a little bit. We talked about 2.0. What do you think this can, you know, if people are coming to you and say, Patrick, that's cool. What's next? What else can ClaimDOC bring to me? What are we doing for the future of RVP?
So really, you know, we have, I think, really established ourselves in the 2.0 version and really kind of, you know, sharpening our knife on that and making ourselves cut even deeper on that side. I think that, like I mentioned earlier, the dual option seems to be very more prevalent on that side, especially for groups that we were talking about that are very resistant towards this. So I think that is, you're even to offer that under 100 lives. We only need 25 lives enrolled on this, you know, on the PPO side to do that. So I think that'll allow groups to kind of get a better feel for both sides of things. So you can kind of compare us next to the PPO and see, was the noise worth it? Was the balance billing really as bad as everyone said? So you can still offer, you know, maybe your higher claimants that really need to be on that traditional plan, that same, you know, offering. Okay. But then, you know, the healthier population that say, I don't need to spend $800 on an employee only rate. I'm going to go to this side. We can really help on both for that.
Well, yeah, and do you think also there's like an industry shift to a degree where obviously more providers are accepting this, more vendors or, you know, competitors are in your space. Do you ever think we'll reach a point where critical mass, this will be the primary way claims are paid, or will it always be, you know, an option but not necessarily the most common one?
I think RBP is going to become mainstream and right next along the traditional models on that side. And I think we're already kind of seeing it happen with more transparency. Now hospitals are required to post their pricing online if you can find it on that side.
Yeah, good luck finding it, but it's there. They promise.
It's there, yeah. So you know, the No Surprise Act, you know, creating a mediator, that's, like we mentioned, something that we're already doing. So I think there is the need for more transparency. And, you know, Spencer, you know, like over the past 10 years, healthcare has gone up over 70%. 2/3 of families who file for bankruptcy cite medical issues as a reason as their financial downfall. Yeah. There has to be a change somewhere. You know, how is that going to go about? And I do think that RBP for right now is that interim, if not long-term fix for that.
Well, and let me unpack that because, of course, you're obviously, I know you're a representative of ClaimDOC and you were with HST before, and, of course, you believe in the methodology, right? But what if somebody was going to listen to you and say, well, I don't know if that's truly the case. What would you say a naysayer would object to, you know, kind of that being the primary payment rate in the future? Do you think somebody's going to say, well, politically or some other reason, or the Blue Cross is too big? You know, what would be your answer to that?
What else you got? Yeah. You know, I mean, what else is on the table that really is this viable? Yeah. That is succeeding. It's been around for over 20 years now. It's only gaining more momentum. And, you know, as I mentioned, I don't think it's going to be the absolute end-all, be-all, but it does seem pretty fair and reasonable to be paying a 25% margin for services when the national average is closer to 10. Okay. So, I mean, that seems fair to me in that regard. But, you know, also we do have healthcare that has blown up quite big. We have very large health systems that have a lot of people to pay for, you know, on that side. So there has to be some middle ground in there as well.
Well, I think I read the other day something to the effect of 17% of GDP is spent on healthcare. Or
yes.
It's insane. And they were saying, I forgot exactly the total dollar amount, but like $700 billion of it was estimated to be waste in the system as well. Yes. Of course, a lot of waste is going to just overpayment for these claims, you know, this extreme, you know, payment rates for some of these providers under these, I would say, less transparent network arrangements and these contracts that nobody is allowed to see. And I totally get that, right? I think everybody is calling for transparency. Sometimes you got to be careful what you ask for because you may not like what you see. But I think inevitably speaking, at least now RBP is telling you, well, if you know X, which is Medicare, a multiple of that is what we will pay. So at least you have a much better sense of what it's going to cost you when you go into to get a procedure, right?
Exactly, on that side. And also you touched on that as well. The auto adjudication process is a part of the problem. You know, studies said that 89% of medical bills contain some type of error. That could be misspelling Spencer, granted, but a lot of that is medical errors. Whether that be an extra zero on the amount of units used, or, hey, did this doctor drop 10 screws that cost $5,000 each, you know, on that side. Like, why should your employer be paying for that?
Yeah, Dr. John Lopez was on here the other day, and he mentioned that he saw somebody get a bill for a mucus retrieval system, which was tissues. It was Kleenex, serious? And they charged something like $800 for a mucus retrieval system. And you're like, come on, guys, that is. I don't even think that's borderlining on fraudulent. That's straight up fraudulent.
You'll love this one. A sleeping aid for a child, $800.
Pillow.
It's a teddy bear.
A teddy bear. Okay. Yeah. Well, man, I want to be the person selling those teddy bears.
I know, right? Where do you get that?
What kind of margin is that? So Patrick, I know we're wrapping up here today. You know, what do you want people to remember? If there's anything they could remember about RBP, what would you want to communicate to them?
I would say that I would definitely very further vet any concerns that you have, that it's not really as bad as everyone kind of perceives it to be. And then I do think that it is a progressive way to go about your health care, how you're going to spend your money. And really, the thing is, last year, we really saw with COVID, everyone kind of put everything on hold. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know what to expect. Let's just stay where we are. This year, everyone has more time. They're really starting to reevaluate their spend, what they're doing with their health care, and they need to achieve a more sustainable spend and trend. So how are you going to go about doing that? And you're going to have to look at some new, more innovative ways to go about that.
Well, I think everybody was forced to take a pretty hard look in the mirror in 2020, and especially employers when they're thinking about everything from when do I bring my employees back? What about the vaccines? What do we do with all this empty office space? Blah blah blah. Of course, healthcare spend is one of those biggest line items, and they're going to have to take a hard look at as a fiduciary, are we spending these dollars correctly? So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best place to reach out? On LinkedIn, go to ClaimDOC.com. What would you
I'm on LinkedIn.
Patrick Martell. Do you want to spell that real quick?
Yeah, Patrick Martell, Patrick, Martell, Martell.
And is ClaimDOC one word or?
One word, yeah. Okay. ClaimDOC. And then my email is just pmartell@claim-doc.com.
All right, man. Well, hey, I hope you get some outreach to this, but really thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate you explaining a topic that I have genuine interest in, and I've never really gotten a chance to sit down with somebody and dive this deep. So I hope that people that, stuck it out this long learn something, and I hope, whatever we can do to educate the market on better options that are available, that's my entire goal with this podcast.
You're doing an amazing job. I think you're really creating a good resource out here in the market, only between this and your whiteboards. I really just wish this was available when I first started in the industry.
Yeah, same here, man. That's why I'm doing it. At the end of the day, I didn't have anybody do this for me, so why don't I return the favor to someone else, man?
You're doing a good thing, man.
Thanks, Patrick.